What United States is trying to do right now, they're trying to sneak back into Asia. The U.S. empire is overstretched. As much as it wants to pivot back to Asia to confront China, which is one of its top priority of the military-industrial complex, it's a case of the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Carl Za, here he is. Hi, Carl.
Hi, David. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, you are most welcome, and I couldn't wait for the conversation to have this with you. I'm not going to waste any time because I want to pick your brain on a host of issues that I believe as geopolitical analyst, I am very concerned as to where things are moving forward, given the rhetoric that is coming out of Washington vis-a-vis China. And this is one of the first topic I would like to talk to you about is I'd like to get your assessments as to where do you see the U.S.-China relations in light of the U.S. growing military presence in the region going forward?
Well, the U.S. militarization of the Western Pacific around the Chinese coast, this is nothing new. This has happened since World War II, especially since 1949, the founding of the People's Republic. I like to put it into a historical context because if you look at the Vietnam War era, during that time, the entire South China Sea was actually an American lake. You know, you got the U.S. Air Force base in the Clark Air Base in the Philippines, the Subic Naval Base in the Philippines, and the U.S. have the naval base in South Vietnam, and it has bases all over Vietnam. It has bases in neighboring Thailand, et cetera, et cetera. And it has the so-called Yankee Station and Dixie Station, which are these two aircraft carrier groups that were permanently stationed in the South China Sea, so allow the U.S. aircraft to carry out bombing of Ho Chi Minh Trail and North Vietnam. So compared to 1970s, right now, U.S. has actually been in retrenchment after the end of the Cold War. U.S. got kicked out of Vietnam, and then U.S. got kicked out of the Philippines, because the Philippine Parliament voted to not extend the lease on the Clark Air Base and the Subic Naval Base. So what United States is trying to do right now, they're trying to sneak back into Asia. You know, especially in the Philippines right now, they're under the guise of the China threat. They're trying to come back to the Philippines. So they're trying to reignite the Cold War 2.0. But U.S. is having its hands full at the moment because, as we all know, U.S. is carrying on a proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, which I think U.S. had bite more than you could chew. And at the same time now with the Middle East conflict breaking out, U.S. had to full-heartedly support Israeli atrocities in Gaza. And that led to the U.S. intervention in Yemen to try to break the Ansar al-Arab imposed blockade on the Red Sea traffic. So the U.S. empire is overstretched. I mean, as much as it wants to pivot back to Asia to confront China, which is one of its top priority of the military-industrial complex, it's a case of the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The U.S. just doesn't, it's spread too thin. And let's face it, right now, Israel demands all the attention because Israel has always been the U.S. golden boy. You know, Ukraine and Taiwan, I'm sorry, you guys have to take a back seat. You know, take a number, go back in the line because everything is going to Israel right now. And as we know, the U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen has been very ineffective. That's not lifting the blockade on the Red Sea. I mean, Ansar al-Allah is effectively a world naval power at the moment because they're redirecting 11% of the world traffic, of the shipping traffic away from the Red Sea through Suez Canal to around the Cape of Africa. Except they're not attacking the Chinese and Russian shippings. You know, like that's why all the ships are going through Red Sea. Now they're putting on their call sign, oh, it's full Chinese crew, or we're going to deliver to China, or this China-owned ship. So, I mean, even like that British ship that was attacked earlier, they're trying to falsely depict themselves as a China-owned ship. Of course, the Ansar Allah had better intelligence. They knew it's not
You're
Chinese.
right.
They know
You're right.
they hit it anyway. Yeah. This is why you are seeing like Bloomberg articles about how China enjoys an unfair discount over their shipping insurance through Red Sea. I mean, like, just like don't support genocide. Do not support Israeli atrocity in Gaza. That's the whole purpose of the Red Sea blockade. But yet U.S. cannot do that. Not only U.S. cannot do that, but right now U.S. cannot even get its own United States Defense Department commissioned ships probably carrying weapons and ammunition for Israel to go through the Red Sea. They just got turned back by the Ansar Allah missile barrage. So yes, U.S. do want to confront China. U.S. do want to create tension all along the periphery around China in the so-called First Island Chain. This is an area that's island chain that stretched from Japan down to Okinawa, through the Philippines, all through South China Sea. But
but
go ahead.
Speaking of Philippines, well, sorry to interrupt here, because before I forget that. Speaking of Philippines, now if we are to say that the Philippines, because I remember right after Marcos Jr. took over, his first trip was to where? To Beijing, right? And came back and signed a military agreement with the U.S. to expand about 9 bases. I'm aware of 4 that they have not been disclosed. Okay. The question becomes is the Philippines playing both sides? And why?
So right now, I think Philippines is not playing both sides. Now they have. I think what happened is after Bongbong Marcos' trip to Beijing, he immediately later he went to Washington, and Uncle Sam made him an offer he couldn't refuse. You think of U.S. as a mafia. You think U.S. government as a mafia. Everything makes sense. Everything makes sense. They made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and right now they're basically spurring they're reversing the policy of Duterte's, his predecessor. During Duterte, like now you hear, China posed a threat to the Philippines in the South China Sea. Now, that wasn't the case when Duterte was president, because Duterte was having a conciliatory approach with China. He was mostly against U.S. imperialism in his own country. That's why U.S. didn't like him. And that time, mostly the China-Philippines relationship was good, and China was pouring a lot of investment to build infrastructures, to do Belt and Road projects. But now with Bongbong Marcos accepting Washington deal, they're now rolling back a lot of the Chinese investment in the country, and to replace with United States bases.
The U.S. officially recognizes Taiwan as part of China. But despite that, President Biden has said the U.S. would come to Taiwan's defense.
U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
The Philippines announced it will allow the U.S. military to expand its footprint. That means there could soon be the largest number of American troops here in 30 years. It's an expansion of an existing mutual defense treaty from 2014. EDCA initially granted American troops access to these 5 Philippine bases. Now, the U.S. will have access to 4 more bases, conveniently, mostly located facing either Taiwan or the South China Sea. What message do you think these exercises and firing a Patriot missile, what message do you think this is sending to China?
If called to do so, we're going to send Patriot missiles downrange, and we're going to do it at the direction of others.
U.S. Marines coming back, U.S. Navy is coming back, U.S. Special Forces are coming back. The Philippines, they elect their own leaders. It's a democracy. U.S. imperialist, #1 terrorist.
Kasi ayaw namin na ma-sweep na lang under the rug. In all but name, the Philippines is a neo-colony of the United States.
President Marcos invited the U.S. military here, and there's a lot to be gained from the United States, like safety.
That's a total lie. That's a complete lie. I mean, the U.S. has always been here, since 1901. If you want to help us get out of our territory, of our own land, of our own seas, of our own women, get out of our country. My goodness, you're not helping us at all.
They have to live with the consequences of which just means less Chinese investment let's face it, United
Yeah.
States is not going to be able to match China in terms of economic development in Southeast Asia. I mean, the amount of US dollars that US invests in Southeast Asia economies is been dwarfed by the Chinese investment into Southeast Asia. Where I am right now in Indonesia, Indonesia just completed its first high-speed rail from Jakarta to Bandung, and it was built by the Chinese, and it's
I heard
traveling
about it.
A high-speed rail links Indonesia's two largest cities.
The significance of the rail is that it also connects two nations, China and Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's traveling at 350 kilometers per hour, something that US will probably not see for a long time. and this is Indonesia. Indonesia is having a high-speed rail, a legitimate high-speed rail before United States, right? I mean, this is what China can do for countries. Yet the Philippines, they're deciding to make their bet with the US right now. You know, we'll see how that works out for them. But I'd like to remind people, the Philippines, despite have not experiencing a war since World War II, the Philippines has not had a major war since World War II. Compare economy of Philippines and Vietnam. Vietnam experienced a very brutal war, a war of liberation against the colonial power France and United States. And Vietnam was desperately poor in the 1975 when the war ended. But compared today, Vietnam and the Philippines, Vietnam per capita GDP per capita is overtaking the Philippines, and it's just the gap is going to grow. And because Philippines right now, its economy is depending on exporting labor to the rest of the world. Vietnam, they actually have countries investing and building not only infrastructure but factories. A lot of the Chinese factories are now being outsourced to Vietnam. So this is a difference. Because Philippines, it has been a U.S. colony for a long time, and even after it reached independence, Philippines was still largely a U.S. vassal state, ruled by a very small clique of oligarchs who do U.S. bettings. And you can see the result. I mean, like the biggest contrast is just look at Philippines and Vietnam. Vietnam has much more better prospect than Philippines, despite having just pulled itself out of a very brutal war. So, yeah.
Interesting. To follow up on the point you mentioned about the presence of military, I have a picture here that I'd like to share with our viewers. This one has to do with the location as to where the U.S. Special Forces are. Those are Green Beret, if I'm not mistaken. And this is closer to the Chinese border. So the question that comes to mind is, what are we doing there and what for?
Well, I mean, they're not there to stop the People's Liberation Army from landing, because whatever, like, the field doesn't, Green Beret is not gonna do shit. I swear. Yeah, they're not. They won't even be able to do crap. But what they do serve is they're serving as the so-called tripwire. They're so-called tripwire forces by have physical presence of U.S. personnel there. So if a conflict does break out and U.S. say, "Oh, our troops are in danger. Support our troops." They killed our troops or they hold troops hostage. That's a way to bring United States into a full war. That is their purpose. And the other purpose is gathering intelligence. But I mean, come on, I don't know what kind of intelligence they can gather. People can look up the Kinmen Island on Google and look at the view of Kinmen Island. Like you can see the city of Xiamen, which is one of the major Chinese seaports just across the waters, and Kinmen is relatively undeveloped, in comparison. So I like to joke, what are these Green Berets gonna do? They're gonna sit there stuck in this tiny island and looking at the amazing Chinese cityscape just cross the water, which they cannot go because of their deployment, their military deployment on the island, and you know that's the only thing they're going to do. But it's designed to be provocative. U.S. is trying to lay a bait for China. You know, you see Anglo media; they always try to predict something disastrous was going to happen. Back in 2019 during Hong Kong protests, for example, a lot of the pundits were saying, oh, it's going to be Tiananmen 2.0. The People's Liberation Army tanks is going to roll down the street of Hong Kong. I mean, that's anyone who knew what's going on in Hong Kong, in China, knew that's bullshit. But a lot of people in the West genuinely believed it because they really want something bad to happen to China because they knew U.S. itself is facing a lot of trouble. And so as a sort of Hopian and Copian, they wish something equally bad could happen to China. They can at least feel better about themselves. I think this is a case where, you know, a lot of the Anglo media were kind of very giddy, almost giddy about potential war breaking out over Taiwan for the last several years. And they're talking about, oh, the Taiwan election might trigger a Chinese response, which is preposterous. And because China has time on its side. China's strength is still growing. You know, they talk about slowing China's economy and booming U.S. economy. But if you look at the numbers, U.S. economy.
No, it's a lie. Yeah.
U.S. economy.
Here in the U.S., our economy is not doing well. It's not doing well.
Well, I mean, they look at the numbers. The U.S. is doing like 2.5% annual growth. They were like, "Oh my God, Biden is amazing! Right? He saved U.S. He's putting on the U.S. on the path of the growth." And the Chinese growth number is 5.3%. So they say, no, China is slowing down. China is declining. China is going to collapse. You think about it. Wait. China's economy just grew twice as fast as the United States, and you're celebrating a great victory of 2.5% growth, whereas the China literally just registered a growth that's double that of the United States economy. So, but there's a lot of copying about China. I mean, this is what the newspaper, you know, they try to sell to their audience. But U.S. also want to increase attention in the Taiwan Strait, in the Philippines, in the South China Sea, so they can justify to deploy more U.S. military assets all along the regions. I mean, the increasing tensions helps the military-industrial conflict. It helps U.S. to sell more weapons to Taiwan. U.S. Congress just approved like a $95 billion budget to supply Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. It's like, okay,
117.
Yes,
117,
yes.
Carl. I was shocked. Even for that, part of it was Taiwan. What for?
Exactly. Is there a conflict in Taiwan? Is there a war in Taiwan right now? I mean, like, okay, Israel. Okay, we know U.S. will support Israel no matter what. Okay, Ukraine. There's actually a conflict going on right now. There's no conflict in Taiwan. So what the hell are they doing? I mean, this is just a way to funnel money to the defense industries. I mean, right now, U.S. has deindustrialized so much. Only thing they can do is military Keynesianism. It's just to continually pile money to give it to the defense industries, because that's the only thing U.S. is producing domestically at the moment, just weapons. It's sad, but it's a state of affair.
Yeah. Let alone that, if you think about it, as a former military myself, we are not in a position to fight two front wars, because we couldn't even win one, let alone fighting two. And second part of it is that China's of today is not of China's of 30 years ago. Things have changed drastically. And this is why I don't understand even one who is here, and I spend my time in DC and all that, didn't get it. Why aren't they getting it? That you cannot be creating tensions or fomenting more tensions with China and thinking things are going to work out for you. It won't.
Well, I mean, I think there is a lot of U.S. conceit. There's a lot of hubris in Washington, especially with the end of the Cold War. And this is why when after the Cold War, when Russia wanted to join the West, that they decide, no, we're going to expand NATO, use the opportunity to weaken Russia further, to expand NATO eastwards, which led to the current Ukraine conflict. I mean, it's the same mentality, but it also extends to, that same mentality extends to China. U.S. is so used to being number one. Now it worries that its number one status is being challenged by China. So it's doing whatever. I think everything is justified as long as keep U.S. in the top spot, which means they have to contain China, which is kind of fool's errand because
it is about the elite's mindset. If the idea of domination at any cost, based also on forceful actions, dominates the American society, nothing will change. It will only get worse.
How do you do that? How do you contain China? China is well integrated into the world economy right now. I mean, if you look at China is literally the world's factory. You blockade China, you sanction China, you're sanctioning yourself.
Look, China's economy has become the first economy in the world in purchasing power parity. In terms of volume, it overtook the U.S. a long time ago.
You even have to blockade the Chinese port. The Chinese goods just don't have to leave to come to California, and then you're going to have a major crisis on hand.
The tools that U.S. uses don't work.
But a lot of the people in Washington, I think they are.
This is about self-conceit. Your political establishment does not understand that the world is changing under objective circumstances.
When they're short-sighted, because they all care about is fear-mongering to get votes and also to please their financial donors, which is a lot of these weapon manufacturers.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
So, I mean, they're not thinking long-term, like 5-10 years. That's beyond anything beyond the election cycle is not something they actively think about. This is a difference between China and the United States, by the way, because China, they have 5-year plans, right? They have multiple 5-year plans. They plan ahead for the future. That's why they're able to build this amazing infrastructure all across the country. In U.S., everything is short term. It's like because U.S. is run by the Wall Street, right? So Wall Street type, they just look at the quarterly profits. They look at the stock price, the quarterly report. So everything is geared to the short term. I mean, this is the fundamental difference between the two systems.
Yeah. Now,